Necrophilia. Translated from Greek, it literally means corpse love. For most of us, the thought of doing anything with a dead body other than burying it is pretty revolting. Not for a necrophiliac. Many who are involved in this sort of thing are also involved in disturbing acts like murder, molestation, and sexual assault. However, as you'll see, there are some necrophiliacs who aren't murderers, but just plain into dead bodies. Before we start giving you the heebie-jeebies, how about you go ahead and click that subscribe button. Anthony Marino. In 2007, the night security were doing their rounds at the Holy Name Hospital in New Jersey when they stumbled upon something we bet they wished they could unsee. The security guard came across lab tech Anthony Marino having sex with the body of a recently deceased 92-year-old patient. Needless to say, at Marino's trial, one of the conditions everyone could agree upon was that the 24-year-old undergo extensive psychiatric testing and psychological treatment. Karen Greenlee. While the vast majority of people involved in necrophilia are men, there are more than a few cases involving women. Take Karen Greenlee, for example. In 1979, the apprentice embalmer took off in a hearse complete with a dead body in the back and vanished for days. When she was eventually caught, she admitted to having sex with dozens of dead bodies over previous years and that the smell of freshly embalmed bodies turned her on. Amazingly, she wasn't jailed for her necrophilia because at the time, it wasn't illegal in California. Genzo Kurita. From 1948 to 1952, Genzo Kurita left a trail of murder in Japan. In addition to killing several people, authorities even discovered he threw his victims, dead and alive, off of a cliff. That's not even the most disturbing part. During one of his murders, Kurita entered a home while everyone was sleeping. After murdering a mother while she slept, he sexually assaulted the body while the woman's child slept next to them. He was executed in 1959. Victor Artisan. AKA the Vampire of Mouy, Victor Artisan was an undertaker in the small French town of Mouy. Obviously, being an undertaker is a prime job if you're into necrophilia, and Artisan took advantage of it. When he was eventually caught with the body of a dead 3-year-old, he confessed to having sex with over 100 corpses, many of which he dug up out of the ground. Like something out of a horror movie, Artisan would even take the corpses home and admitted that when they didn't talk back to him, it hurt his feelings. Marcelo de Andrade. This Brazilian serial killer is as twisted as they come. For 9 months in 1991, Marcelo de Andrade went on a killing spree that saw him murder 14 boys in the alleyways of Rio de Janeiro. For much of the spree, police didn't pick up on de Andrade because crime was so prevalent in the city and the victims were street kids who often went unnoticed. What did stand out was that this serial killer was crushing their skulls, drinking their blood, and even having sex with their corpses. Fortunately, one boy did get away and alerted police, who arrested Marcelo soon after. Lam Kor Wan. In the early 1980s, Hong Kong was shaken by a serial killer. A quiet taxi driver, 24-year-old Lam Kor Wan, was involved in the murder of 4 women in 1983. Shockingly, he would hide the bodies in the apartment he shared with his parents. When alone, he would cut up his victims and put parts of their bodies in Tupperware containers. As a result, he became known as the Jars Murderer. In addition to taking pictures of his victims, Lam also videotaped himself performing sexual acts with one of his victims, all of which made it easy for a jury to sentence him to life in prison. The Hickory Street Four. In January 2013, Joshua Miller, Alyssa Massaro, Bethany McKee, and Joshua Minor were partying in a Joliet, Illinois home. Later that night, they invited 2 men, Eric Glover and Terrence Rankin, over, only not to party. The 4 ended up murdering the 2 men. Not done there, over the next few days, the group continued to booze and drug-fueled party while the bodies of their victims lie on the floor. At one point, Minor and Massaro engaged in sex while lying on top of the corpses, although they later changed their story to say it was beside the bodies because that makes it better. Kenneth Douglas. Cincinnati morgue attendant Kenneth Douglas worked at his job from 1976 to 1992. Everything seemed fine until investigators ran into a problem with one of their murder cases. During an autopsy at the morgue, semen was discovered that didn't match the DNA of the known attacker. Further investigation later linked it to Douglas. Upon interrogation, he was linked to 2 other cases of necrophilia and even admitted to abusing up to 100 bodies in the morgue during his time there. Edmund Kemper III. Edmund Kemper had endured a troubled childhood and was a disturbed individual. He had killed the family cat and, when a teenager, murdered his grandparents. After a short stint in prison, he was released but continued his murderous ways. From 1972 to 1973, Kemper went on a killing spree which included his own mother and 6 female students. In every instance, he had sex with the bodies of his victims, even his own mothers. Convicted of the crimes in November 1973, this is one necrophiliac who is likely never leaving jail. Carl Tanzler. Florida's Dr. Carl Tanzler wasn't a murderer or a rapist, but he is still at the center of one of the most disturbing cases of necrophilia. In the early 1930s, Tanzler fell in love with a woman named Elena, who later died of tuberculosis. A couple years after her death, he went to her crypt and took her decomposing body home. There, he reattached her limbs with wire, covered her decomposing skin in cloth, wax, and plaster, and even added glass eyes and a wig. Until he was discovered 7 years later, Tanzler kept the body in his house and even slept with it on numerous occasions. Yikes. Well, what do you think, folks? Let us know in the comments how you felt about this video. And while you're here, why not cheer yourself up by watching a different video we have on offer here at The Richest? And hey, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, and bye-bye.